All right, Sound Life, welcome back to the Kingdom Conversations podcast. Today we have Pastor Suzy here. Yes, thank you for joining us. Mm-hmm. We're going to be talking about a really fun topic today, and just the idea of Sabbath, rest, work balance, hurry culture. That's a big aspect of society and culture in our culture today. And so we just want to talk about what it is, what the problem with it is, and how we fix the problem, right? Mm-hmm. So let's start off just by talking about what is hurry culture and why is that a bad thing, right? Just to have a baseline, like what are we even talking about here?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because, why is it bad to be in a hurry?
Yeah, and be busy.
Yeah, and be busy all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like that's like almost a sign of a successful life.
Totally.
In our culture is that you're busy or that your kids are busy or something like that.
Yeah.
And I guess just that's not the sign of a successful Christian's life. Yeah. Like the successful Christian is following the rhythms that God has established for us and following the principles of life that God's established. Yeah. So, I think it's a way to just feel like you're winning at life, feel like you're doing the right things that God hasn't set up for us, you know? So I guess that's why it would be damaging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just we live in such a fast-paced world, right? And so I think we all can think about our busiest moments, whether it's a day, a season, or our lives in general, maybe right now, where it's like, man, I can't slow down. Like I'm going to bed really late at night, waking up early, and every hour that I'm awake, our family is booked and busy. Like one person is taking these kids this place and the other ones, and we're never together, and it's just... And when we're in those places, whatever it looks like for, whether you're a single person or a parent or whatever, it's applicable to all. Yeah. But we know the pain and like the burnout that comes with that, right? And we know what it feels like to have our identity placed in those things, because there comes a day where you can't do it all. And there comes a day where you get sick and you feel guilty not being able to do all the things, right? We know the burnout feeling that comes with that and the emptiness that comes with that. Yeah. Because really that's like a false sense of success, like you talked about. And I think there's a false understanding of that being how we have community and relationship, right? Because we're on all these teams and our kids are in all these clubs and we're doing all these things around people, but you're doing it all in such a busy, fast-paced way that there's not real relationship happening most of the time, right? So
totally. Yeah,
you could cycle.
You could fill a calendar, but they're not, things that are really filling your soul, Yeah. And I do think that there is like the success piece of it is totally an issue that comes out, but then also just the not wanting to like slow down and like have times where you're alone or you're like silent or even resting, because sometimes we're just scared of what that feels like. We're scared to reflect and to even like we're scared to like listen to God. And so I think that those both could be reasons why we do, we overbook ourselves or we don't take the time to rest.
Totally. Yeah. And kind of in the same maybe parallel to being busy is also just the noise, right? Yeah. The noise of life. We're always listening to something, we're always talking, or we're always having conversations with people or whatever. We just fill the sound world so much, right? Because of that busyness and because of just wanting to fill to overflowing with a lot of times the wrong things, right? So I love that, having those times to like just be able to think and to just like reflect and to process and all those things, because so often we experience something and then you don't have time to process internally what just happened and what did I learn from that and what is God trying to teach me through that, because we've moved on to the next 5 things on our calendar, you know? So we're missing out on that.
That's really good.
Because a part of this conversation is not how we can do less. Like, we're not trying to use our time, right? Like, there's 24 hours in a day, and you're going to use them all regardless. But it's how we're using them, right? And the things that we're using them and how we're choosing what goes in those 24 hours. So, that's important. You kind of touched on this already, but I just think there's so many underlying issues present here. Like, you said, not wanting to be alone with our thoughts. Yeah. Those kind of things. Success, wanting that to be where our success is found. what might be some other things that we're trying to maybe cover up, some root issues that this is a symptom of?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us have just a lot of fear in our life about lots of different things, and it could be, processing like past trauma that's even happened, or even just a fear of God, and man, what is God gonna tell me if I actually give him this space, or what is he gonna have me do, or those kinds of things. And even family, right? Like, being you could be married for a long time and kind of disengage with each other, or maybe you're friends with people and you're doing all the things together, but you're not really like sitting and having a conversation like this where you go deep, because those things take time. Like those are moments where you have to devote time to that. Those kind of like Sabbathy, like just like sit and listen. Those are harder to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And often uncomfortable because they're kind of anti our culture and the norms, right? Like sitting down over a cup of coffee and talking about something like we are right now. Yeah. That would be maybe weird to the person that you're trying to start that with, but stepping out and doing it is important, so I think there's a lot of pride involved too. I think it kind of is along the lines of that success piece, is just like we want to feel important, and we want to feel like, all these people want to be in my life, and all these people need me, and I have so many tasks and so many people I need to talk to, and all this stuff that I'm needed, But then on the other side, maybe insecurity or some pride, both and, is the piece of people pleasing, right? Like there's so many things that I don't even want to do, but I say yes to them because I don't want to say no, right? I don't really want to do it, but they want me to, and I don't want to say no, right? So it's like yes is often easier to say to somebody than no.
Totally.
But we need to be better about answering correctly, not just to please the person.
We did that sermon series, Just Say No. I think that was last year.
I think so,
But you're right. It is so hard for us to say no. And you also reminded me of even like we have a fear of missing out. Yes. And I think as a parent, a fear of my kid missing out, as a single person, like a fear of missing out, on who knows what, you know, but just like
whatever
everything.
They're doing.
So I think that's another piece of it, which it kind of relates to like the success and those things, but that's very real.
Yeah. But it's an important thing to do, as uncomfortable as it is, right? Like getting better at these things, getting better at saying no, balancing our schedules, being stewards of our time. That's really why it's important, is because it's our time that God has given us. Yeah. And he's asked us to be the steward of how we're using it, right? So that's kind of the problem, but enough about the problem. Let's talk about the solutions. So what are some things? I know Sabbath is a big part of that, so maybe we start with kind of the biblical foundation of Sabbath. What would you say is kind of that foundation?
Yeah, well, I think God establishes it in creation, right? He works 6 days, he rests the seventh, and that's the ideal, that's the order that he has set up for humans to flourish in, and that is what he calls good. Obviously, there's laws that come with that in the Old Testament as well, where he literally tells, people, this is what I want you to do. But that's just what we see that God is doing in the Bible, and says that's what's good for us.
Yeah. And shows that, I mean, he doesn't need anything, right? But he chooses to do it himself as an example. Yeah. In that creation story from the get-go, right? He shows that that's important, and that's the design that he's created. Yeah. So, and I love that you brought up the Old Testament, kind of those laws and stuff, because obviously we could look at the Bible and say, oh, that's just an Old Testament law. We're not living under those laws anymore. Yeah. So why is this applicable to us today?
Yeah, I think that's a valid question, because there's lots of ceremonial laws and stuff that don't really make sense for today's world. Yeah. And even Jesus, he talks about the Sabbath, and he says, the Sabbath isn't made kind of to be this restrictive thing, but the Sabbath was made like to be good, to help people flourish. And I think it does go back to that it's established in Genesis before the fall, before sin enters.
Yeah.
The Sabbath is established, and everything we're doing as humans is to get back to the original design of creation, which was to have Sabbath.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, we're going to have Sabbath for all eternity.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. And that's really what heaven is. Like, heaven is the ultimate Sabbath. It's that eternal rest that we have. So yeah, it's still definitely relevant for today. It's still something that serves us well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that just makes it even more beautiful, just knowing that what we're participating in here on earth is a heavenly thing that we're participating in. Something that is not, it's not just a response to the brokenness of this world, right? It is just a design of God for a perfect world, right? And so that's even more beautiful that we get to engage in that with God, right? We do it with Him. Yeah. So, yeah, that kind of brings us into this idea of what does it look like, right? So what do you do on Sabbath?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I do think that there is some, like, it isn't a law, you know, like Christians, Jesus fulfilled the law for us. Yeah. So we get a lot of freedom and grace, and it's an opportunity to participate in what God's design is, like you're saying. Yeah. So I think Sabbath, you know, we've talked about it kind of in the context of Sabbath should be worship. Like, you should be worshiping God. You know, we talk about it as in, like, it's your Sunday, you're coming to church, you're gathering with the family of God. So it should have some, like, family elements. It should have food. That's like almost a core value of our church.
We love food.
Is food, because, you know, we have like God's table. And so it should be feasting, I guess, is the beyond food. It should be feasting, right? It should be feasting. It should be worshiping God. And then there is an element of, like, we should be serving one another. And so I know, you know, sometimes you can be like, well, I'm still working, right? But I think it is important to remember, like, it isn't under the law. Like, we're doing this as a blessing. Yeah. And so still serving in our community, in our church, you know, serving our kids, like, you're not, like, unable to do those things on Sabbath, but you're doing it out of a heart that's like, man, this is a heart of like, trying to flourish, a heart of, like, God's design, not like an obligation. Yes. And that's the difference, right? Like, if you are doing those things out of an obligation, that's like a heart check thing. Yeah. And not necessarily a bad thing about those things, but just like an attitude of our heart.
Yeah. And it's work, but it's very different work than maybe we're doing throughout the week in our jobs or at home in our, you know, weekly rhythms that we have, right? Like, it is outflow of that worship, right, that we have on that day with our church family for God and for his church, his family that He's established. So it's different than the normal work that we do in the other 6 days of the week.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's, like you said, there's freedom to do, you know, there's freedom to do what we're kind of establishing in what our personal Sabbath looks like. What are some things that you and your family do in Sabbath?
Well, I mean, I've preached on this a few times, and so you guys may know, bacon is like the thing that we do in the O'Dwyer house every Saturday morning. We do Sabbath on Saturday just because I am a pastor, so I work Sunday. Right, that's what so technically, that's how our family does it. So Saturday mornings we have breakfast. Yeah. We have bacon. We typically, you know, we have a time where we turn all the screens off. I have, like, do not disturb that goes on my phone. And so we turn screens off. We try to go outside because we're really big homebodies. So staying home is kind of normal. So we try to go and do something abnormal that's still restful. Yeah. So we try to go outside. Maybe go on a walk somewhere, go to a park or something. Of course, depending on the weather, because we live in Washington. We do live in Washington. And then we just, like, pick a meal, either lunch or dinner, that's, like, our favorite. That just something we all want to eat, and we all want to eat together. And then we talk about something, you know, faith, Jesus, something related.
Like having the intentional, slow down conversation. Yeah, that's really good. And you do that with a child, too.
Yeah, so with our son,
Families can do this, you know.
Families together,
And, like, I'm a single young adult, and I live with my parents. And so we do Sabbath together on Saturdays. That's our one day of the week that we all have off on the same day. The same day that we all have together off. And so that's what we do as well. We have that time. We have breakfast together. Meals are intentional times of connection. We have those special conversations, just reflecting. Getting outside is a big thing for us too. Like, we all love to be outside in nature, and usually that is kind of like, man, when you are standing in front of the ocean, there's just something about like the conversations that you have are just like reflective, and it just like gets us in that right mindset, right? And we often, all of us, feel closer to God too. We just have those special moments together and as individuals on that day. And then sometimes movie night is involved.
Yeah, same.
So that's always a fun thing to do too. So
I think the hardest thing is just like protecting the day. I think that's the hardest thing about Sabbath. And we're not always perfect at it. There's definitely Saturdays where we're like, well, that was a fail,
right, like that wasn't our best attempt at Sabbath.
Or it's like, you know what, we got breakfast right, but like the rest of the day is not, and I think that's important, right? That's an important thing to just like, you're gonna try your best, just like with anything with Jesus, like you give it your best, but like don't have this like strict like man, if I just fail, I'm just gonna never do this again.
Totally, an all or nothing. Like, I'm either gonna get 100% every time or not even try. That's definitely a dangerous mindset that we don't want to go into with anything, Sabbath or anything else in our faith walk. So that's really important.
Yeah, for sure.
So obviously within this conversation, we don't Sabbath 7 days a week, right? We Sabbath 1 day a week.
That would be amazing.
That would be a crazy, I don't know, we would have to come up with a lot of new things to do.
Yes, totally.
To Sabbath every day, but we work 6 days and we rest 1. And so in terms of 6 of the 7 days we are working. So how do we have within that a work balance and not swing to where we're kind of in the lazy atmosphere?
I think this is a really important thing, because it's just like, depending on who you are is your struggle, and some people, this is the struggle. And like when you talk about Sabbath, they're like, yes, like
I can get behind
I
this.
can play video games and I can blah blah blah.
Right.
And so I do think this is really important, that we were created to work, to be productive. And that doesn't mean like have a paycheck, right? If you're a stay-at-home mom, you're
still working.
You're working.
Absolutely,
oh my goodness.
24/7.
But you need rest, right? So so we're meant to be productive, and that is the other side of Sabbath, is making sure that you get your work done so that you can rest, right? That you can You don't have to do the dishes on Saturday. You don't have to be doing laundry on Saturday or Sunday. Whatever your rhythm is.
Right.
And so it's important that we're not like just taking laziness during the week, so that now we've made it so we can't Sabbath.
Right.
And I think sometimes like that's the actual issue, because it's we all have the same amount of hours, like you were saying. We all have those hours. And what are we doing? Are we working, to get to that point where we can have that full day of rest?
Yeah, to not only be able to fully enjoy it because you've done everything. You're not, I'm not going to feel very restful when it's like I have a million things that I should have already done that I didn't do, right? That are looming behind me.
Yeah.
So if I set myself up for success, I'm going to get more out of it that God wants me to get out of it. And then I'm also going to be able to do that because I've planned for it, right?
Yeah.
It's like so often people, when you're like trying to wake up earlier in the morning, it's like, well, it starts the night before because you set yourself up to, sleep a full 8 hours or however many hours you need to sleep, and you've prepped your lunch for the next day or whatever. Like, you've done the things ahead of time to be able to be successful in that moment. It's the same thing. It's like your 6 days are how you're going to prepare yourself for a good Sabbath on the 7th day. So
I think that's really good. And I think like there's also seasons of life where maybe you're working 2 jobs or something like that, where you're a single parent, like with young kids. There are just like moments where you can't have a full day. And so, hear a heart that we're not saying you're doing something wrong.
Right.
But I think if you can, like in any way possible, get that full day of Sabbath is way better than just being like, well, I'll just do 2 hours a day as my Sabbath days. Like, there's just a reason why that's not as restful, Yeah. There's a reason why a week of vacation is more restful than like 5 days spread throughout the year.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think that is something God put in us, and so we should strive for that. But know that there's seasons of life where you might be able to hit that and you might not.
And that goes back to the concept of not being an all or nothing, right? Like, do your very best with what you have in your season, you know, and it's going to change season to season.
Yeah.
And so take your life and don't let that be an excuse.
Yeah.
But also don't say like, oh, well, I don't have a full 24 hours I can give to this, so I'm not going to do it at all. Right? Like, if you have a half day that you can give to it or whatever, start somewhere and work your way up to that 24 hours in whatever season that comes to you. So, yeah, that's a good reminder. And then I think we have to set healthy boundaries and limits, right? Like, there's so many different things with our time that, especially with social media and different things, everything vying for our time wants as much of it as it can get. Yeah. Right? People want as much of you as they can get. Yeah. Our phones want as much of us as they can get. Yeah. There's never going to be a lack of things for us to work on, right? Yeah. Like, I'm always going to have 45 pending tasks on my list, right? Or more. Yeah. So it's not for a lack of those things. So how do we kind of set ourselves up for having those boundaries in all the different areas of things that want our time? Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm definitely not like an expert on that. We're still figuring it out. I know, totally. But I think that there is that like limit, and you should just set some of those limits for yourself, you know? I think when you're kind of a driven person and you're someone who maybe, you know, you love your job or you love being with your family, like whatever kind of side you're on, there is always more to do. And so you just have to set yourself up like, I have to say no, kind of goes back to that, saying no to things. And just knowing, you know, the right things that you should be saying no to. And I think just going back to like, well, God says it's good to say no on one day, so I'm going to do that. And and just making sure that it is the right things. Because I think there are things you could fill your Sabbath with that are that are what culture says is restful. Yeah. But I think really just like praying through and like, you know, letting God speak into what is worshipful for me to do this day? What is feasting that I'm doing this day? What is serving that I'm doing this day? And really, I don't know, just letting God speak into those things. Yeah, and knowing there might be certain things like things on your phone that you just need to say no to entirely. Yeah. Or, hey, there's a limit to how much of that I'm going to have. And so this is how much time I'm willing to give. Yeah. And set up time limits on your phone. Yeah. And my struggle is not putting in the password when they've ended. But so that's part of me saying no. Like, no, I've done enough on there, more than enough. And so I'm going to put that down because I have other things that I can and should be doing as a steward of my time. So I think that's the key, is the mindset of I'm stewarding every hour, every moment, and I want to use it for the right things in the right moments. Yeah. So setting up some sort of boundary or limit for ourselves, because naturally if we don't think about it and we're not intentional, we're just going to end up by the end of the week being like, well, I definitely didn't do what I was hoping to do because I didn't have a plan. Yeah, right? Exactly. So having a plan is key. I think it reminds me of parenting. Obviously I'm a parent, but you think about like, you just leave your kids to do whatever they want. Not good parenting. Like they're going to turn out, who knows what they're going to turn out to be like, right? Yeah. You put boundaries on them because it's healthy. Yeah. And that's what God has done with us with six days working, one day of rest, is he set boundaries and said, I'm setting you up. And I think something I heard recently, a leader that I respect saying, is just like having a vision for what your future is going to be if you make these decisions today. Yeah. So if I really do like take Sabbath seriously, if I take rest seriously, what will that do for my life? Yeah. And that helps you say no when the time limit comes up on your phone of like, okay, if I say no to this, it means this. If I say yes to this, it means this. Yeah. And not just letting yourself mindlessly make those decisions. Totally. Having a why behind it. Like, I'm not just saying no to my phone. I'm saying yes to all these other things that I'm going to choose instead. Yeah. And vice versa. Like, when I say yes to something, I know I'm saying no to 1,000 other things. Yeah. So having that why is so important. Yeah. Understanding it's not just to take enjoyment and entertainment out of my life, right? It's to put the things that I'm saying yes to and giving those the space that they need to flourish. Yeah. For me to flourish. Yeah. So, yeah, what are some good metrics that we can look out for when we are kind of seeing the balance off? Like we're headed in the wrong direction. What are those metrics that we can, kind of red flags that pop up? Yeah.
I think, I mean, for me, it's a lot of that is like, how am I treating people? You know, like, I can tell. It's funny because it's like the people you love the most that you usually treat the worst when you're kind of stressed out.
Totally.
It's like the people that really see you and you're like, oh, why am I getting like so upset about this thing? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Right. And when I can identify that, you know, hopefully, and I might identify it later, like when it's too late, but
after the fact.
Yeah, after the fact, and then I can be like, well, okay, something's off. Like and then I can, you know, think, oh, well, yeah, I didn't, you know, like it's been a couple of Saturdays since we've really had time and those kinds of things. So I think also, like, if you establish your own boundaries and you're breaking them all the time, like that's a sign something's off, right?
Yeah, totally. And then I think having the people that know what your goal is in this.
That's good.
Like, me and my parents were great accountability for each other, right? And so they're the first to say, like, oh, man, like, you seem like you're, like, never home this week or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Or, man, you just, like, why are you watching so much TV? Or whatever it might be. Like, they're going to be the first ones to lovingly call me out and remind me of my goal, right? And remind me of what the best is for me.
I love that.
So having those people to be that for them and for them to be that for you.
I think that's a cool, like, element of Sabbath, too, of, like, when you have family, and not just, like, blood family, but church family built into your Sabbath, you have people that are looking for you. You know, like, you have your growth group that's like, okay, you've missed, like, the last 3. Like, what's happening? You know, so I do think there's an element of Sabbath that's supposed to be that, like, people that can have a pulse on your life, too.
Totally. It's so good.
Yeah.
I think as we kind of wrap up, I just want to talk a little bit about the difference between priorities and balance, right? And we've kind of used these words throughout this conversation already, but just to give some clarity on this, because I think so often culture and society tells us to have a balanced life. Like, you get all your pieces and you give them all equal amounts of time and energy and focus in your life. I don't think that that's what God calls us to, right? I mean, he has certain things that have more of a priority. And so I think that's more the goal of having a prioritized life, right? So how do we live that out? How do we choose priorities over balance?
Yeah, that's really good. I do think a balanced life is kind of a cultural lie. Yeah. And it does create hurry in our lives because we're like, okay, I have to have, you know, this physical activity and this, I have to be reading a book, right? And I have to be hanging out with friends and I have to have a job and a career path and like all of the things. I should be doing all of them all at the same time. Oh, and also stay up on culture and TV and like and, have a social and the news and be active in politics and like you're just like, that's not a thing. Like that's not realistic.
That's actually impossible. To do it well.
And so I think that there's ways God's created each of us, different interests we all have, different seasons of our lives that we're in. And so I do think that priority and that priorities, those change all the time. And I think it is just that taking the time to reflect on what is your season of life, what are you in, like where has God called you to in this season, right? You know, even if you're a parent, like what season of life are your kids in? What do they need from you now? It's gonna look different in a year. So you know, my season of having a 10-year-old is different than seasons with kids who are teenagers. And so just like not being overwhelmed by that, but just like being thankful, being in the season you're in. And then going from there.
Yeah, because we could try to stuff a bunch of things into our life that aren't conducive to our season. And then we're just going to be major stressed out because the things that have to happen there's no room for them because we filled it with things that shouldn't exist right now for us. I think of this example. It's like if you had a big jar and you were trying to fit a bunch of rocks into it. I don't know if you've seen this, but you have to for everything to fit, you have to put the biggest rocks in first. And then all the little ones will fill in around it.
That's good.
But if you fill the jar half full with a bunch of pebbles, those big rocks aren't going to fit, right? So you have to establish what your big rocks are first. And those are things like your family, things that have to happen, the things that you've committed to that are, like you said, conducive to that season. Put those in, and then you decide what else can fit around those things. Because if I fill my half the jar full with a bunch of little rocks, like my social life and the things I said yes to that I should have said no to and all these things, right?
Yeah.
Then my big things that I have to do regardless of if they fit in my 24 hours or not
are going to
overwhelm. And now I'm going to have a broken jar and it's going to be stressful.
That's
right?
so good.
So.
I think also this hits on something, which is comparison.
Yes.
And we can, instead of thinking, what are the big rocks God has given me in my jar right now?
Yeah.
Like, we're looking and I'm like, well, look at Amy's big rock. I want that rock.
Right.
And it's like, God hasn't called me to that. And so I do think, like, these all tie together with so many different issues.
Right.
And I do think that when you start to establish Sabbath, it kind of brings those out. Totally. And helps you really, like, see, okay, yeah, I've got some work to do to get this right.
Yeah, I think that's key. So as we kind of wrap up, what are some next steps that people can take to really implement this?
Yeah. Well, I think, like you were saying, find your time. Like, if that's half a day to start, if that's a full day to start, most likely you are one of our Sound Lifers that's, coming to Sound Life. So you've got to start already, right?
Yeah.
You're already at church on Sundays. Yep. But how can you grow that? So how can you add a few hours onto that are, maybe without screens? Maybe you take someone to lunch after church, you talk about God, and like that's your start of a Sabbath rhythm. Yeah. Just how can you take a next step into a Sabbath rhythm or get back to it? This has been a topic we've talked about before, so maybe you've had a Sabbath, you stopped, or
got out of the habit.
So what is, like, how can you add more to whatever you have right now?
And I think just take inventory. Right? Like, figure out where you're at right now and what you can do to make it better and to get one step closer to where you want to be.
That's good.
Yeah, we all have a next step. Even if we are already in a rhythm of 24/7 or 24 hours. A 24-hour, not 24/7.
Yeah, not 24/7.
But a 24-hour rhythm of Sabbath. There's still, how are you using it?
Yeah.
Or what does your other 6 days look like that you can tweak to make even better than what we're doing. So none of us are exempt from a next step this week. Yeah. So we're excited to hear how your journey looks this week, and we're here to support you in however way we can. So reach out if there's anything we can do to help. Know we're praying for you, and let's not just talk about the kingdom, let's go and be the kingdom. So have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Welcome, Sound Life Church. Hi, I'm Pastor Sean, and I'm here with your parenting tip of the week. And this is going to be a strange introduction this week because I want to tell you about a TV show that I loved. It's an older show, and it's called Lie to Me. And that it seems kind of ironic that I would bring that in, but today's teaching is on body language. And the person in the show was like a human lie detector. And he could identify, micro expressions that communicated them to him. So he could crack cases and figure out if people were telling the truth or lying or all those things. And believe me, body language, we're not really talking about that for investigative purposes in the family. But our body language communicates a lot to our kids. We have to remember that we pick up on their body language, but they also pick up on our body language. And I'd like to read a stat for you just from the University of Texas, Permian Basin, and it shared the following. It says this: the 55-38-7 formula. The 90% figure wasn't plugged out of the air. How many of you heard that? That, 90% of communication is nonverbal. Okay, so Albert Maraban, a researcher of body language, first broke down the components of face-to-face conversation. He found that 55% of communication is nonverbal, 38% is vocal, so that means in our tone, in what we say, and then 7% only words. This is where the idea that the vast majority of communication is nonverbal originated. So here's the thing. How many know that if I put on a frown face and I sound like I'm angry at you as I'm communicating these things, you're not going to be as receptive to me as if I smile and say, hey, isn't this great that we have this information to learn from? We know body language. We see our daughters when they're sassy to us, or our sons when they're cranky and they don't want to do what we're asking them to do, and they even borderline belligerent. Well, all of those things have to do with body language. So not only do we need to help them develop good body language, we need to make sure that we are demonstrating good, healthy body language to them. And I'm a Yukon Husky girls basketball team fan, and Gino Ariema, he says that that's the number one thing. He goes, I have the most talented basketball players in the whole world that play on my team. But when I recruit them, I will only recruit people who have good body language. If they don't have good body language, he goes, I don't even recruit them. And then if they behave that way when they're on my squad, I send them right to the bench, because bad body language is contagious. And so here's the thing. I hope this is inspirational to you as a parent. Evaluate your own body language as you interact with your kids. Because are they feeding off something that you're not intentionally trying to communicate to them? So intentionality is a big part of this as well. To let them know what you're intentionally trying to communicate to them. And remember that a lot of what you say to your children is non-verbal. It has to do with your facial expressions. It has to do with your tone of voice. And then how many think that's a great place to just pray and ask God for help? Because here's the thing. I want my body language to reflect the fruit of the Spirit. So I'm going to read Galatians 5:22 and 23. But the Holy Spirit produces the kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And then listen to this part. There is no law against these things. You can't do any of those things too much. Ask yourself, does my body language communicate what I want it to my kids?